Jake stepped off the old city bus in the late afternoon, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He was 24, fresh out of college, working at a downtown programming firm while trying to figure out life in the big city. His apartment building loomed just ahead, a tired structure of faded brick, a minor contrast to the sleek steel towers in the distance. But the rent was manageable, and the location was close to both his office and the small local theater scene that fired his roommate's ambitions. He jogged up the narrow flight of stairs, the overhead fluorescents buzzing softly as he approached the second-floor hallway. At the end of the corridor, apartment 2C, with its scuffed lime green door, awaited him. Once inside, Jake flicked the lights on. The living room was a hodgepodge of used furniture, a comfortable mismatch of pastel cushions and battered coffee tables. A small TV stood on a rickety stand in the corner. The place might have been small, but it was their home. Chloe's bedroom door was shut. Jake could hear a quiet rustling from within, papers flipping, maybe some pacing. He set his bag aside and walked toward his own room, but halfway there he heard her voice call out, "Jake, is that you? I need your opinion on something." He pivoted back, lingering by Chloe's closed door. "Yeah, I just got in. What's going on?" Chloe swung the door open with a dramatic flourish. Her dark hair was piled in a messy bun, and she wore athletic shorts plus a worn t-shirt that boasted some old performance's logo. "I have an audition scene I need to practice," she said. "An actual scene with a partner. My usual friend Maya can't come over. Would you mind reading the other part?" Jake grinned. They were close friends after all. They had met in college, lived together for a year now, and had developed a casual, teasing rapport. "I'm not exactly an actor, you know," he joked. She wagged the printed script in her hand. "It's easy. It's just about feeding me lines so I can work on my timing and emotional beats. I'll owe you one." He nodded. "Sure, no problem." Though he still wore his office attire, slacks, a button-down shirt, he wandered into Chloe's room. Her desk was cluttered with pages from various plays and film scripts. A vanity table was pushed against one wall, stacked with makeup, costumes, and a couple of wigs. Since finishing college, Chloe had thrown herself into the local theater community. She was on the lookout for any role, big or small. "Here," she said, handing Jake a stack of papers. "It's a dramatic scene between two women. Usually Maya and I run it together, but, well, you're the only other human in the apartment." Jake looked at the lines, scanning through them. "Got it. I'll do my best," he said. Chloe stepped back, scanning her closet. "Actually," she said mischievously, "since it's a conversation between two female characters, can we have a little fun with this? Maybe you could put on a wig or something. I just want the vibe to feel a bit more authentic. It helps me get into character." Jake let out a startled laugh. "You want me to dress up as a woman? We're just practicing, right?" She placed her hands on her hips. "Come on, have some fun with it. Acting is about embodying a role, you know? You don't have to do the voice, but the physical effect might help." Before Jake could protest, Chloe dug out a shoulder-length wig from a pile of costume pieces. "Here," she said, thrusting it at him. "Try it." Jake shrugged, more amused than uncomfortable. "Sure," he muttered. He slid off his button-down shirt so it wouldn't get wrinkled or messed up by the wig, revealing a plain t-shirt underneath. Then he let Chloe perch the wig on his head. The synthetic strands slid across his forehead, tickling him in an odd but not entirely unpleasant way. She fussed with the wig's position, trying to line it up properly along his hairline. "Hold on, this might slip around," she said, opening a drawer to pull out a couple of hairpins. She planted them along the wig cap until it felt reasonably secure. "And maybe," Chloe disappeared into her closet again, "a scarf. This will help me imagine the scene as it's supposed to look on stage. You're playing a confident character, so we need something that feels right." Jake's eyes widened as she drew out a sheer scarf, pastel with swirling patterns. She draped it over his shoulders. "Please don't strangle me with that," he teased. She laughed, stepping back to examine him. "There, perfect." Her expression was half humorous, half thoughtful. "You actually look kind of cool, if a bit ridiculous." He pulled the ends of the scarf taut, peering at himself in the small mirror mounted on her closet door. "Well, this is definitely not my usual after-work activity, but let's do it." They settled in. Chloe started at the top of the scene, delivering her lines with drama and intensity, while Jake read the other part. Though he was no actor, he tried to inject some emotion, if only to help her get into the right state of mind. The wig shifted on his head occasionally. Each time it did, he couldn't help noticing the lightness of the fibers, the gentle drag as they brushed his neck. The scarf, too, made him feel oddly more aware of how he carried his shoulders. Despite his initial hesitation, Jake found himself strangely intrigued by the difference these small changes created. Mid-scene, Chloe took his hand. "Listen to me," she said in a low, intense voice. "We can't keep lying to each other like this. We have to face what's happening head on." She squeezed his fingers for emphasis, fully in character. Jake responded with his lines, swallowing a smirk as he did so. It wasn't a comedic scene, but the absurdity of him wearing a wig and scarf while delivering these emotional lines kept threatening to break the tension. Chloe, though, was laser-focused. Her brows furrowed, her voice quivered at times. The depth of her dedication made him admire her. She wasn't just reading words, she was living them. When they finished, Chloe slid out of character with a deep exhale. "That's a tough one," she said. "It's such a heavy scene for an audition, but I guess that's the part. A woman grappling with heartbreak and betrayal. Thank you, though. That was exactly what I needed." Jake adjusted the scarf around his shoulders. "You're welcome. I can see why it's draining." Chloe walked around the room, organizing scattered pages, her mind still half lost in the character's emotions. "Take off the wig if you like," she said absently. "Or keep it on, whatever." She grinned. "I have to say, I never expected my new roommate duties to include me handing you a wig and scarf." Jake smiled in return. "Hey, I'll do what I can to support your rise to stardom." Chloe's eyes lit up. "Keep that up, and I'll ask you to read for all my roles." She tossed him a playful wink. Jake carefully removed the wig, placing it on a styrofoam head Chloe kept on her dresser. He slung the scarf back over a chair. "Let me know if you need more help, but I think I'll go start on dinner, if that's cool." "Sounds perfect," she said. Jake slipped out and headed to the kitchen, still chuckling under his breath at the entire scenario. It struck him as a fleeting comedic moment, the mild silliness of cross-dressing for an hour just to help his roommate. He fired up the stovetop, tossed some pasta in a pot, and did his best to push the strangeness from his mind. Yet over dinner, as Chloe animatedly discussed the nuances of the scene, Jake noticed his thoughts drifting back to the wig and how he'd felt wearing it. The memory lingered through the night, even after he retreated to his bedroom. Over the next few days, Jake's life returned to its usual rhythm. He got up early, rode the bus downtown, spent hours debugging code at his cubicle, then came home tired, with lines of logic still swirling in his head. Chloe hurried off to various auditions, often leaving in a flurry of rummaged drawers and half-drunken coffees. At times, she'd rope Jake into reading lines for smaller roles, usually minor comedic bits, but the audition for that dramatic scene was clearly more important. One night, Chloe was out late at a theater workshop. Jake, restless from sitting at his desk all day, wandered into the living room, hoping to watch something mindless on TV. He mindlessly flipped channels, not really settling on anything. A mild curiosity fluttered in his mind, the memory of wearing Chloe's wig and scarf. It wasn't purely about comedic value anymore. He'd realized that something about that moment had intrigued him. He couldn't quite put a name to it, but he recalled the surprising mix of curiosity and unfamiliar excitement. He tried to push it aside, but his thoughts returned stubbornly. Chloe wouldn't be back for hours. She'd texted that she might even crash at a friend's place if she was working on audition scenes until late. Jake found himself drawn toward her bedroom. He hovered outside the door, feeling a bit silly about the idea. Still, it was their shared space in a sense, though she obviously kept her personal things in there. They had an understanding about privacy and boundaries. Yet, he felt a quiet compulsion to look again at that wig, maybe even slip it on for a moment, just to see if he felt something new. It took him a few minutes to overcome his hesitation. Pushing the door open, he was greeted by the usual chaos: pages of scripts on the desk, random bits of clothing on the bed. The wig stand was on top of a small dresser. The wig from that day still hung there, looking vaguely lifelike, as if it anticipated a performance. Jake glanced around, double-checking that he was indeed alone in the apartment. Then, with careful steps, he approached the stand. He picked up the wig. The synthetic strands caught the glow of the small lamp on the desk. Even in this stillness, the act felt charged with a strange sense of transgression, like rummaging through someone else's private diaries. But he pressed on, slipping off his t-shirt to avoid messing up the wig's styling. Then he carefully placed it on his head, feeling the gentle weight settle in. A mirror on the closet door revealed him, an ordinary young man wearing a short, practical haircut beneath a slightly ill-fitting wig. There was a sense of difference that gave him a slight thrill. He lifted a hand to brush the hair aside, noticing how his reflection changed. The curve of the wig's style highlighted angles of his face differently. The sensation was unexpected, stirring an odd satisfaction. He realized in that moment that it wasn't merely a fluke during the practice session. He truly felt a pull toward the shift in appearance. Jake traced his reflection, a fingertip drifting along his jawline. Then he spotted one of Chloe's scarves tossed on a chair, the same one he'd worn during their practice. He reached for it, draping it over his shoulders once more. The swirling patterns came to rest across his chest. Standing there in front of the mirror, he adjusted the scarf, noticing how the silky fabric glided over his skin. A faint tremor coursed through him, an awareness that he was doing something typically considered outside the realm of his everyday life. It was so quiet in the apartment that he could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. His heart thudded just a fraction harder than usual. He let the moment sink in. He wasn't sure what to call the feeling, part curiosity, part fascination. Finally, he peeled off the wig and scarf, returning them to their spots. He left the room without disturbing anything else. Before bed, as he pulled the covers up, he couldn't shake the memory of his reflection in that mirror. A small part of him felt guilty or worried about crossing a boundary. Another part of him felt drawn to do it again someday. Weeks passed. Chloe's audition for the dramatic role came and went. She didn't land the part, but she recovered quickly, immersing herself in the next opportunity. Jake continued to help her rehearse. Occasionally, she'd trot out costumes, hats, or random props to bring a sense of realism to her scenes, but neither of them mentioned the wig and scarf routine again. If anything, Jake suspected Chloe found that experience entertaining, but ultimately unimportant. For her, it was simply an exercise in readiness. Jake, on the other hand, felt that the memory hadn't faded. In fact, it lingered. Each time he saw that wig stand in the corner of Chloe's room, which he glimpsed whenever she left the door open, he felt a faint tug inside. He found himself alone more often than usual because Chloe had joined an amateur theater group, so she was constantly running off to rehearsals or small showcases. On nights when the apartment was silent, he'd resist the temptation for a while, but inevitably, after a certain hour, the curiosity would win out. He waited until he was sure Chloe wouldn't pop in unexpectedly. Then, he'd slip into her room, rummage quietly for the wig, a blouse, maybe a skirt. He'd try to handle everything carefully, noting how items were folded or placed so he could put them back exactly as he found them. The entire process felt covert and thrilling. He'd lock his bedroom door, lay out the items, and slip them on in front of his own small mirror. He noticed differences, how a blouse felt on his arms, how a skirt shifted around his legs, how it all changed his sense of self when he glanced at his reflection. He paid attention to details, from the texture of the fabric to the shapes created by the clothing. After a few minutes of checking himself out, he'd feel a mixture of amazement and confusion. He'd imagine what Chloe would say if she caught him. Probably shock, maybe questions he wasn't prepared to answer. So far, he told himself he was just experimenting, indulging a side interest that had popped up unexpectedly. But it was becoming a small routine, a secret habit he looked forward to on nights she was gone. Still, he worried. He became paranoid about leaving a stray hair out of place or misbuttoning a blouse. He tried to keep track of exactly how each item had been arranged. Once or twice he worried Chloe might notice, but she never said anything. She was busy, engrossed in her own pursuits, and the matter of him wearing her clothes seemed so far outside her imagination that it never occurred to her to check. One crisp Saturday morning, Chloe was supposed to be out for most of the day, attending an all-day workshop. Jake woke up around 8, made coffee, and settled on the couch with his laptop to handle some chores. By mid-morning, his mind started wandering. A subtle voice inside suggested that he could spend a bit more time exploring Chloe's wardrobe in a leisurely way without worrying she'd return too soon. Ordinarily, he felt guilty even considering it, but a gentle restlessness urged him on. After verifying no new messages indicated an early return for Chloe, Jake ventured into her room. This time, he allowed himself a bit more time to open drawers and look more carefully. He told himself he was only exploring. He sifted through an array of skirts and dresses, scanning patterns and shapes. Eventually, he found a simple black knee-length skirt and a soft sweater that felt comforting to the touch. He gathered these items, along with a wig he'd grown partial to, and tiptoed back into his own room. Locking the door, Jake set his chosen pieces on the bed. He slid off his t-shirt and sweatpants. One by one, he pulled the skirt up over his boxers, the elastic band hugging his waist. Then he tugged the sweater over his head. He wiggled his arms into the sleeves, feeling the gentle cling of the fabric. Finally, he carefully fit the wig over his hair. In the mirror, the reflection that greeted him felt both familiar and new. The black skirt hung modestly around his knees, the sweater's neckline soft around his collar. Something about the outfit resonated in a soothing way he struggled to articulate. He even dared to spin once, the skirt flaring out slightly around his legs. He checked the fit and frowned at the sweater's shape. It didn't quite hang on his frame the way it might on someone else, but it was enough to make him feel that same small spark. The apartment was quiet, and for a moment, he could almost pretend he lived in a different scenario where this was normal. That fleeting thought brought him a strange mixture of calm and anticipation. Suddenly, he heard a sound from the hallway. Footsteps. A bolt of fear shot through him. He froze, quickly flicking the lock to be sure it was secure. He listened, heart pounding. The footsteps grew louder, and then he heard the jingle of keys. He realized with dawning horror that Chloe was home, and from the sound of it, she was in a rush. Jake scrambled, pulling the skirt and sweater off frantically. He yanked his sweatpants and t-shirt back on, nearly tripping over his own feet. The wig, which he'd tossed onto the bed, threatened to tumble to the floor. He snatched it up and shoved it into a drawer, then cracked the door to see if he could slip across the hall to Chloe's room to return the clothes. No luck. Chloe's voice filled the apartment. "Jake?" she called. "Are you here?" He had to move fast. He stuffed the skirt and sweater into a crumpled ball behind his back, cracked his door wider, and tried to gauge the situation. Chloe was in the living room searching the couch for something. She wore a distressed expression. "I forgot my resume folder," she muttered to herself. "It's got to be somewhere in here." Jake cleared his throat, stepping out of his room while keeping the bundle of clothes behind him. Hey, you're back early," he said. She spun around, relief washing over her face. "Yes, I left an important folder and I can't find it. I just ran back to grab it." She took 2 quick steps toward the couch. "Sorry to bug you in the middle of the day," she said, rummaging between cushions and under pillows. Jake tried not to let panic show. "No problem," he replied. "Is it a black folder with a label?" "Yeah, exactly." He saw it lying partially beneath the coffee table. "I think it's here," he said, lunging to grab it. As he handed it to her, he tried to keep his other hand, the one behind his back, pressed inconspicuously against the small of his back, concealing the stolen articles of clothing. She snatched the folder, relief flooding her face. "You are a lifesaver," she said, hugging it to her chest. "I have to go. This workshop is starting soon, and I need this to talk about my background." "No worries," Jake said, inching back toward his bedroom. "Glad to help. Good luck with everything." She offered him a grateful smile, then hurried out the door again. The door shut, and the sound of her footsteps receded. Jake stood there, tension draining from him, the borrowed clothes balled up in his hand. His heart still pounded. He watched from the window until he was sure she'd left for real. Then he let out a long breath, retreating to the safety of his room. When at last he slipped back into Chloe's bedroom to return the skirt and sweater, he refolded them as carefully as he could remember. He placed them exactly in the drawer he'd found them in, all while reminding himself this was a close call, one that might easily have led to questions he wasn't ready to answer. That evening, when Chloe returned for the second time, Jake pretended everything was normal. They had dinner together at the small dining table, talking about her day. Chloe lamented how exhausting the workshop had been, but said she'd gotten good feedback on her audition reel. She never mentioned the clothes or anything amiss. Jake did his best to appear calm, though inside he still felt the tremors of the near miss. Days turned into weeks again. Chloe landed a role in a small production, a comedic play that would run for 6 weekends at a tiny community theater. She was ecstatic, constantly practicing her lines in the living room. Jake was proud of her, but also noticed the apartment was increasingly scattered. Costumes, scripts, and all manner of props multiplied in the corners. She spent much of her time away at rehearsals. Jake continued his job, though it was more draining than usual. He had to finish a project under a looming deadline. After full days of coding and dealing with office politics, he'd come home exhausted, only to find himself missing Chloe's presence. Despite that, her frequent absence granted him more privacy. Over time, the secrecy of his new interest became a consistent element in his life. Whenever the mood struck and he was sure Chloe wouldn't be back, he'd wander into her room, carefully pick out an outfit, and spend some time in his own bedroom wearing it, studying himself in the mirror. He wasn't sure if it was purely the novelty or if it hinted at something deeper about how he felt. Each time he tried to puzzle it out, but he could never quite articulate the reasons. He told himself he wasn't doing anything wrong, he wasn't hurting Chloe, and he wasn't stealing from her. It was simply an odd interest that had grown from that day he helped her rehearse. But a voice in the back of his head warned that eventually he might slip up. The more often he borrowed her clothes, the higher the chances that Chloe would notice something out of place. One Sunday afternoon, Chloe's new play had a rare day off, and she was in a mood to socialize. She suggested they invite a couple of their mutual friends over for a casual get-together. That evening, the group assembled in the living room. laughing and exchanging stories over bowls of chips and homemade dip. The conversation soon turned to the topic of life after college, how surreal it was to be fully responsible for bills, job hunts, and uncertain futures. At one point, their friend Alicia mentioned a comedic story about an old high school friend who once dressed in his sister's clothes as part of a dramatic prank. Everyone chuckled except Jake, who forced a laugh, feeling a hint of tension coil inside him. It was a silly story in principle, but his awareness of his own private habit made him hyper-attuned. He shifted uncomfortably, hoping no one would pick up on any odd reaction. Chloe, oblivious to Jake's concerns, laughed along. "That's hilarious," she said, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "I mean, wearing someone else's clothes? That's an interesting choice." Jake, taking a long sip of his soda, hoped the conversation would move on. After their friends left and the apartment quieted, Jake found Chloe sprawled on the couch, still smiling. "That was nice," she said. "I feel like I never get to just hang out with people anymore." Jake sat beside her. "Yeah, it was a good time," he replied. For a moment, the memory of Alicia's story lingered. He fought a pang of guilt and told himself to relax. There was no way anyone knew about his secret. Chloe turned on the TV with a languid gesture, letting a random show run in the background. "So," she said, "how's work? You've been pretty stressed, right?" Jake nodded. "Deadline's coming up, but we're almost done. It's manageable. How about you? You've been in rehearsals non-stop." She groaned. "Yeah, but I love it. Though I wish I had more time to, I don't know, maybe keep my room clean or do normal people stuff. I come home so exhausted that I can barely deal with the mess in my closet." Jake felt his heart flutter. He prayed she hadn't noticed anything amiss. "I'm sure it's not that bad," he said lightly. She waved a hand dismissively. "I mean, maybe not, but I swear sometimes I can't even remember where I put half my clothes." It was a casual statement, but it sounded ominous to Jake. He laughed it off, though, and changed the topic to mention a new show he'd heard about. Chloe seemed content to move on, and they chatted about random things for another hour or so before parting for bed. As the weeks continued, Jake grew bolder. He tried on dresses with more elaborate cuts. He tested different wigs. He'd practice crossing the room in a pair of Chloe's old heels, too small, but he squeezed his feet into them for brief moments. It was a precarious game. Each time, he tried to restore every item to its place. He'd grown adept at memorizing exactly how Chloe folded her clothing, how the closet was arranged, even how each wig was brushed. He took photos on his phone of the drawer before rummaging, so he could replace everything precisely. His caution, though impressive, was not foolproof. Late one afternoon, the unthinkable happened. Chloe came home earlier than expected from a rehearsal that had been canceled. Jake, wearing a simple sundress and a light wig, heard her key in the lock. He bolted for his room, but in his panic, he left Chloe's door ajar, the drawer open. He didn't realize it until he was already scrambling to remove the dress. "Jake!" Chloe called from the living room. He yanked off the wig, threw on his own clothes, and quickly stuffed the dress behind his back. That was when he realized, to his horror, that he'd left Chloe's bedroom in disarray. The drawer that had been partially open now gaped wide. In addition, a dress or two had slipped off the bed. If Chloe went to her room, she'd see an obvious sign that someone had been rummaging. He had mere seconds. "Yeah," he managed to shout in return, forcing a casual tone. "I'm in my room, 1 sec." He dashed to Chloe's door, but he nearly collided with her in the hallway. She wore a quizzical look. "What's up?" she asked. Her gaze flicked past him into her bedroom, where the open drawer and the rumpled clothes were in plain sight. Jake's mind spun. "Oh, I was... Chloe, I can explain," he stammered, not yet sure how he'd do so. He glanced over his shoulder, praying for a miracle that might hide the disarray. Chloe stepped around him into her room. She surveyed the scene. The open drawer, a couple of skirts half on the bed, half off, one dress sprawled out of place. Her eyebrows shot up. "You were in my closet?" she asked, voice tight with confusion and a hint of accusation. Jake swallowed. His head felt hot, and his heart hammered against his ribcage. I was, yeah." He couldn't lie his way out convincingly. The evidence was all there. "I know this looks weird. I was just looking for something." Chloe stared at him. Looking for what, exactly? She noticed the sundress in his hands. Her eyes widened even further, taking in every detail, the frantic flush on his cheeks, the way he clutched the garment. "Jake, what's going on?" she asked quietly. He exhaled shakily. "I'm sorry. I should have asked. It's just, this started after we did that scene with the wig and scarf. I got curious, and I've been borrowing your clothes sometimes." Her face was a mixture of bewilderment and slow realization. "You've been wearing them?" Her tone wasn't disgusted, just surprised. "Like, often?" He nodded, feeling more vulnerable than he ever had in his life. "I didn't mean any harm. I know I invaded your privacy, and I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to bring it up. It was just an impulse at first. Then I got more curious. I wear them." Chloe sank onto the edge of her bed, placing her hands on her knees as if trying to steady herself. She looked at him carefully, taking in his trembling stance, the guilt in his eyes. "Wow," she said at last. "I never expected. That's definitely not something I ever imagined you doing." Jake didn't move, not sure if he should sit or stand. He hated the tension in the air. "I'm sorry," he repeated lamely. Chloe pursed her lips, glancing at the open drawer. "I don't know what to say," she admitted softly. "But Jake, I'm not mad, just caught off guard. Is this like a joke? Or something you're exploring? Or what?" He took a trembling breath. "It's not a joke. I'm not mocking you or anything. I just realized I liked how it felt. The wig, the clothes. I'm still figuring it out. I should have told you." She exhaled, then patted the bed beside her, signaling him to sit. He hesitated, but finally perched next to her. Neither spoke for a long moment, the air humming with tension. She looked at the dress in his hands. "I recognize that," she said. "It's the sundress I wear sometimes." He nodded, still holding the soft fabric. He forced himself to speak, quietly and honestly. "I know it's weird," he said. "I know it's not something people do every day. If you're upset or uncomfortable, I totally get it." Chloe shook her head slowly. "Weird? Maybe. Unexpected? Definitely." She hesitated, looking at him. "But I'm not disgusted or something. You're my roommate, but you're also my friend. If this is something that's important to you, I'd rather understand it than push you away." A wave of relief crashed over Jake. He blinked back a rush of emotions. "I appreciate you saying that," he managed. "I've been feeling so guilty about sneaking around." Chloe brushed a stray hair off her forehead. "I can't promise I won't be weirded out at times because it's new to me, but we can talk, right?" She gestured at the dress. "Do you want to, keep wearing stuff like that?" His cheeks flushed again. "I do, but only if you're okay with it. These clothes are yours. I never wanted to disrespect your space." She was silent for a while, mulling it over. At last, she said, "I have so much going on with the play and everything else, but I want us to be honest. I don't love the idea of you going through my closet without asking. That's the biggest issue for me, my privacy. I want some boundaries." Jake nodded vigorously. "I totally understand. I'll respect whatever boundary you set. If you want me to stop altogether, I will." She drew in a breath. "I don't think I'm going to ban you from it, but let's make a rule. If you want to borrow something, you ask me. Let me know first, okay? I just need to feel comfortable about who's wearing my stuff." He fiddled with the hem of the dress. "That's fair. Absolutely." Chloe gave him a faint, tentative smile. "I can't believe I'm saying this," she said, "but would it help if we figure out what clothes actually fit you well or which ones you like, so you're not rummaging?" Jake stared at her, astonished by the offer. "Are you sure you want to do that?" She shrugged. "I'd rather be involved than be left in the dark. And weird as it might sound, you've always been supportive of me, reading lines, wearing that wig for me. If this is something that helps you, then I'd like to meet you halfway." Jake felt a wave of gratitude, and he reached out to squeeze her hand. "That means a lot. Thank you. I know this is so strange for you. It's strange for me too in a way, but yeah, thank you." Chloe squeezed his hand back, then lightly tapped the sundress. "So, do you want to hang that up properly in my closet? Or would you prefer to put it on now, or—" He blinked, a small laugh escaping. "Oh gosh, I don't want to force you to watch me in it right this second." She shrugged with an almost playful grin. "I'm not going to run away screaming. You can do what you want, just not in secret anymore. Let's handle this like adults, okay?" Jake nodded, feeling an unspoken weight lift from his chest. Even though he was still uneasy about where this might lead, at least the tension of sneaking around was over. He rose from the bed and carefully hung the dress back in the closet, closing the drawer he'd left open. Chloe watched him, expression thoughtful. "Tomorrow we'll have some time," she said. "Maybe we can go through my stuff and sort out what you can borrow, what definitely won't fit, and all that." He nodded gratefully. "Yes, that would be great. Thank you." They ended the night somewhat drained, but neither was angry. Chloe seemed more bewildered than anything. Jake retreated to his room, exhaling in relief. He didn't know how the conversation would evolve from here, but at least the dreaded confrontation had happened, and they were both still under the same roof, still speaking to each other. True to her word, Chloe spent part of the next day sorting her closet with Jake. It was awkward at first, both of them acutely aware of the strangeness of the situation, but Chloe kept a light-hearted tone, rummaging through blouses, skirts, dresses. She'd occasionally hold something up to Jake's frame and chuckle if it was obviously too small. "This one is going to be too tight in the shoulders," she said, tossing it aside. Then she held up a flowy blouse. "But maybe this is flexible enough." Jake found himself laughing along with her, though there was a subtle undercurrent of tension. She paused at one point, studying him with concern. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked softly. "You seem, I don't know, embarrassed, I guess." He shrugged, meeting her eyes. "It is embarrassing. I'm not used to letting people see this side of me. You're the first person I've ever told." Chloe's gaze softened. "Well, I promise I'll keep it between us. And if at any point this is too weird for me, or I need space, I'll let you know. Fair?" "Absolutely. I don't want to push you." She managed a small smile. "I know. Now look at this," she said, brandishing a light cardigan. "Could work with a bunch of outfits." Jake chuckled, shaking his head in a mixture of amazement and gratitude. They piled a few possible items on the bed, then folded others that clearly wouldn't fit, or that Chloe preferred to keep exclusively for herself. Once they'd organized everything, Chloe hopped up. "Try them on," she said, nodding toward his bedroom door. "Go ahead. No reason to be shy." He hesitated, scanning her face to be sure she was serious. "You want me to just do it now, in front of you?" She looked a bit uncertain herself, but shrugged bravely. Might as well. If something doesn't fit, we'll know right away. Jake felt the heat rise in his cheeks, but nodded. Okay, he said. He gathered a blouse and a simple skirt, stepping into his room. Chloe lingered in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms folded, as if trying to be casual about it. It took Jake a moment to collect himself. Then he slipped into the skirt. He pulled the blouse over his head, smoothing out the fabric. The mirror on his closet door reflected an image that made his stomach flutter. Chloe watched quietly. She nodded once. That actually fits decently, she said. You might need to watch how you handle the zipper on the skirt. It's a bit snug, but overall it's not bad. Jake turned in the mirror, feeling both nervous and oddly proud. He mustered a small laugh. Yeah, I guess it's all right. They repeated the process with several items, discarding a few that looked awkward or felt too tight. Chloe eventually relaxed enough to joke about certain pieces. You're definitely not wearing my red cocktail dress, she teased. I love that one too much. Jake laughed, thankful for the levity. Wouldn't want to steal your date night look anyway. By the end, they'd sorted a small selection of items that Chloe was willing to share, including a blouse, a couple of skirts, and a comfortable sweater. She also let him keep 2 of her older wigs that she rarely used for auditions. These are a bit outdated for my acting jobs, she said, but you can style them or whatever. Jake felt a swirl of emotions, gratitude, nervousness, a strange sense of relief. He gently packed the borrowed clothes in a small bin he could store in his room. Thanks, he said quietly, turning to Chloe. I appreciate it so much. I know it's a weird request. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Weird or not, you're my friend. I'd rather be open about it than have us sneak around each other. Just promise me you'll be straightforward, okay? He nodded. I will. Promise. She gave him a half smile, then turned away, rummaging in a drawer for some random item. So that's that, she said. I'm starving. Let's order pizza. They let the matter rest for the night, placing an order and settling on the couch with a TV show. Jake noticed that the tension he'd carried for weeks began to loosen. He still felt uncertain about what this new dimension of his life meant for him. But at least Chloe's reaction, while surprised, was not as disastrous as he'd feared. They shared an easy camaraderie, joking about pizza toppings and the soap opera-level drama on TV. By the time they finished eating, it felt like a typical roommate evening, albeit with an unspoken new understanding. A few days later, Chloe introduced Jake to some basics about styling the wigs. She was an expert after years of wearing them for roles. Always brush them gently from the ends upward, she explained, demonstrating with short, careful strokes. Jake watched, occasionally taking the brush to try it himself. He found it oddly calming. They also discovered that some hair accessories Chloe had, like clips or headbands, could help secure the wigs to his hairline. She rummaged in a small box for bobby pins. My head is smaller than yours, so you'll need a few extra pins, she said, parting the wig hair to show him where to anchor them. Jake followed her instructions, feeling like an odd student in a private tutorial. He used the mirror in her room this time, carefully placing pins as she directed. When he finished, she studied him critically. That's not bad, she said. You can still see a bit of your natural hair on the sides, but maybe that can be blended in. They spent half an hour like this, calmly discussing technique as if it were the most normal thing in the world. At one point, Jake paused, glancing at Chloe's reflection in the mirror. Hey, he said quietly. Thanks again for being so chill about all this. I never wanted you to feel uncomfortable. Chloe gave him a tiny smile in the reflection. You're welcome. And I'm okay, really. It's different, sure, but I value your friendship, and it's not something I think you should have to hide. She handed him another bobby pin. All right, keep going. He nodded, returning his attention to securing the wig. A small blossom of warmth spread through him, touched by her willingness to help him navigate this private interest. In the following weeks, life found a new equilibrium. Chloe's play ran successfully on the weekends, and Jake attended one of the performances to cheer her on. She had a supporting role that still garnered plenty of stage time, and she shone in each scene. After the show, they hung out with other cast members at a local diner. One of the actresses teased Chloe about living with a mysterious programmer roommate, but Chloe only smiled and said, "Jake's awesome," leaving it at that. At home, Jake occasionally wore the clothes Chloe had approved for him. Sometimes she'd be around, cooking dinner or reading lines on the couch, and he'd sit quietly in a borrowed blouse, reading on his laptop. They kept it low-key. Occasionally, Chloe would glance over and share a small smile, but neither made a big deal of it. Their arrangement seemed to work. They respected each other's boundaries, and Jake no longer had to sneak around. Of course, there were moments when Jake felt self-conscious. Once, the pizza delivery person arrived while he was wearing a skirt. He hurried to his room, letting Chloe open the door so he wouldn't have to explain. Another time, he nearly forgot to remove nail polish he'd been testing before going to work. He managed to wipe it off in a rush, mindful that he wasn't ready to share that side of himself beyond the apartment. Chloe remained busy, but she always found time to practice lines with Jake or chat about new auditions. Their friendship stayed intact, evolving only in the sense that they shared a deeper understanding now. Jake noticed that Chloe occasionally asked if he wanted to try new pieces. She'd hold up a scarf or a pair of leggings and say, "Think these might suit you?" with a little teasing grin. In turn, Jake supported her as usual, running lines, helping her film self-tape auditions for some small commercial roles. He teased her about her comedic roles, offering half-hearted quips that she gleefully swatted down. Their living dynamic was playful, supportive, and in its own way, comforting. A quiet Sunday arrived. Chloe was off from performances, and Jake had no pressing deadlines at work. They decided to dedicate the day to cleaning up the apartment. Piles of laundry, a sink full of dishes, and general clutter had built up in their busy schedules. By mid-afternoon, they found themselves side by side, folding laundry in the living room. The sun beamed through the windows, illuminating floating dust motes. Chloe hummed a random tune under her breath, occasionally complaining about how many costumes she had to wash. "I keep forgetting how sweaty I get on stage," she lamented, wrinkling her nose. Jake laughed. "Hard to remain glamorous when you're under those stage lights, I bet," she mock-pouted, then returned to folding. Suddenly she paused, picking up a blouse that Jake recognized as one of her old ones he'd been wearing recently. "Hey, this is one I said you could borrow, right? Do you want it in your stack?" Jake paused. "Sure, if that's okay." "Yep." She tossed it onto his pile, then hesitated, looking at him thoughtfully. "By the way, are you thinking about buying your own stuff at some point, so you don't have to rely on mine?" Jake blinked. The question had crossed his mind, but he'd never had the courage to act on it. "I guess I'd like to, but I'm not sure how I'd handle going into a store or even ordering online. I feel too nervous about someone noticing." Chloe tilted her head. "Well, if you order online, packages just come here. I can help pick stuff out if you like. Or I could go with you to a store sometime. Make it look like we're shopping together for me or something." He felt a faint rush of gratitude. "That might be nice," he admitted, "but only if you're comfortable. I don't want you to feel like you have to do all this." She shrugged. "I'm not opposed. If it'll make you more comfortable in your own wardrobe, why not? We can take it slow. Maybe start with something simple like a t-shirt or a sweater you like. Nothing that screams fancy dress, you know?" Jake nodded, a small smile forming. "That sounds good. Let's do that soon." "Deal," she said. She picked up a pile of towels, heading off to the linen closet. Jake stacked his newly folded clothes, marveling at how much had changed since he'd first slipped on her wig in secret. Now there was an odd normalcy to the fact that he had a dedicated stack of Chloe's borrowed items. It was far more than he ever would have expected back when this all began. That night, the two of them found themselves lounging in the living room, each scrolling absently on their phones. The overhead light was dimmed, casting a cozy glow across the battered coffee table. Chloe cleared her throat. "I've been thinking," she said, glancing at Jake. "We've been living in the city for over a year now, and we don't really do big outings together. It's always either me running off to auditions or you working. Maybe we should go out sometime. Not like a date, but, as friends. Hang out." Jake perked up. "I'd like that. Sure. Where do you want to go?" Chloe tapped her chin dramatically. "I was thinking maybe a small art museum, or a coffee shop that's rumored to have great open mic nights, or the monthly local film festival." Jake considered. "Those all sound good. The film festival might be fun. We can see some weird indie documentaries or student films." She flashed a grin. "Okay, film festival it is. Next Saturday they're doing a day pass thing where you can go in and out for multiple screenings. Let's plan on that." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Let's do it." Chloe set her phone aside. "Great. And hey, if you ever want to, wear something you picked out or whatever, I'm cool with it. But I get it if you'd rather not in public." Jake gave her a soft look. "I appreciate that. I'm not sure how ready I am for wearing anything outside the apartment, though. But it means a lot that you'd offer." She shrugged, wearing a small, encouraging smile. "We all do what we can handle." With that, they lapsed into a comfortable silence. The TV, muted, displayed a rerun of an old sitcom. Jake's thoughts drifted, feeling an immense relief that they were still such good friends. He couldn't predict the future, but at least they'd grown more honest with each other. Saturday rolled around, and they headed to the local film festival, a short bus ride away. The early autumn weather was mild, leaves turning golden on the street trees. They spent the day wandering between screenings, some comedic shorts, some experimental pieces that bored them both, and one surprisingly moving drama about family relationships. After an evening Q&A with a local director, they walked out onto the street, the glow of old-fashioned lampposts illuminating the sidewalk. They strolled without hurry, rehashing the films they'd seen. Jake carried a small bag of leftover popcorn. Chloe's eyes sparkled as she summarized the final documentary, praising the cinematography. Jake teased her for analyzing it like a film critic, which made her laugh. Eventually, they found a small cafe still open. The sign boasted, "Open late, coffee and pastries." They stepped inside, where warm light and the scent of fresh coffee greeted them. Taking a seat by the window, they ordered drinks, a latte for Chloe, a chai for Jake. The place was quiet, aside from a soft hum of music through overhead speakers. Chloe leaned her elbows on the small wooden table, chin propped on her hands. "I had a good time today," she said earnestly. "We should do more stuff like this. I forget how nice it is to just hang out together outside the apartment." Jake nodded. "Yeah, it's easy to get stuck in our routines. I liked this." They sipped their hot drinks, gazing occasionally at the passers-by outside. Chloe's gaze flicked back to Jake. "So," she said, lowering her voice a bit, "how have you been feeling? About everything?" Jake understood her meaning. "It's been easier now that I'm not sneaking around," he admitted. "I still feel weird sometimes, but I'm happy we're on the same page." She reached out and gently touched the back of his hand. "I'm glad. And hey, if you ever want to talk more, I'm here." He nodded, smiling appreciatively. "I know, thanks. I'd never want to put you in an awkward position." She waved that off. "You're not. Or if you do, I'll just tell you. Communication, right? They clinked their cups together in a playful toast, then returned to sipping. Later, as they made their way home, the bus swayed gently beneath flickering streetlights. Chloe dozed off on Jake's shoulder. He stared at her reflection in the window, listening to her gentle breathing. It dawned on him how much their relationship as roommates mattered to him, beyond sharing bills or a convenient location. They were true friends who had navigated an odd situation and come out stronger. He didn't know exactly what the future held for each of them. Maybe Chloe would land a big role and move to a better apartment, or even a different city. Maybe Jake's job would transfer him somewhere else. But for now, they had a good thing. Over the following month, Jake made small steps toward building his own wardrobe, aided by Chloe's quiet support. He ordered a plain blouse online using their shared address. When it arrived, the two of them opened the package together in the living room, half laughing at the sense of ceremony. "That looks nice," Chloe said, holding it up to examine the fabric. "If it fits well, maybe you can get more from that brand." Jake tried it on. It was a modest fit, but it worked. He gave Chloe a grateful nod. She winked. "Now you're not stuck relying on my closet." He grinned. "I'll still rely on your fashion expertise, though." She raised an eyebrow. "Of course, you'll always have to rely on that." They both laughed, letting the matter rest. One evening, not long after, Chloe was heading out to meet some theater friends, leaving Jake alone in the apartment. He settled in on the couch with a laptop, planning to watch some streaming shows. As he scrolled, he caught sight of the small bin of clothes in the corner, his new blouse folded neatly on top. He thought back to how different life had been just a few months ago, when he first helped Chloe rehearse by wearing that wig and scarf. All that time spent confused and uncertain, worried that Chloe would reject him if she discovered his hidden interest. Now, he felt a quiet sense of peace that their friendship had endured, even grown. He picked up his new blouse, slid it on, and smiled a little at his reflection in the TV screen. The sleeves felt soft against his skin. No tension, no guilt. He realized how grateful he was for Chloe's open mind. Later that night, when she returned, they exchanged a few words in the dimly lit hallway. She yawned, exclaiming how tired she was from a long day of auditions. Jake offered to make her some hot tea. She accepted, and they stood in the kitchen together, the kettle whistling softly. Chloe eyed the blouse he wore. "Looks good," she commented, gesturing at him. "I still say you need some accessories, maybe a nice necklace or something." Jake chuckled, pouring the steaming water into a mug. "Baby steps," he said lightly, handing her the mug. She nodded. "Sure, but whenever you're ready to experiment more, I'm here." He felt a rush of affection for her. "Thanks," he said simply. They sipped tea in the low light, leaning against the kitchen counters. The rhythmic hum of the refrigerator was the only background noise. Chloe set her mug down after a few sips. "Anyway, I'm turning in," she said. "Tomorrow's an early call at the theater." She paused at the doorway, looking over her shoulder. "Jake?" He glanced up. "Yeah?" She smiled gently. "I'm glad we're roommates, and I'm really proud of you for letting me in on something you didn't have to share. I know it can be scary." A warm flush rose in his face, but he grinned. "I'm glad we're roommates too. Sleep well." She disappeared into her room, closing the door. Jake remained in the kitchen for a moment longer, finishing his tea. He realized how truly fortunate he was to have stumbled into this living arrangement with someone like Chloe, a person who could handle the surprising turns of adulthood with surprising grace. They might each have their own life path, but in that small apartment, they made space for each other, forging a unique bond of trust. Eventually, the night grew still. Jake flicked off the kitchen light and padded down the hallway to his bedroom. He carefully hung his new blouse in the closet. His reflection in the mirror caught his eye. A young man, outwardly the same as ever, but who had learned a great deal about himself over the past few months, even if he wasn't quite sure how to articulate all of it. He only knew that he found comfort in this side of him he'd uncovered, and that he was grateful for a roommate who didn't shut him out, grateful for a friendship strong enough to withstand surprise and uncertainty. He climbed into bed, the city's distant glow filtering through the thin curtains. Somewhere on the other side of the wall, Chloe was likely reviewing her lines for her next audition, or maybe already drifting to sleep. It occurred to him that their daily routines, Chloe's acting hustle, his programming job, might continue to diverge as they chased their respective goals. But for now, their paths converged in that messy living room, that shared kitchen, the cluttered closets, and that convergence gave him a sense of belonging he never expected to find in this big, unpredictable city. Closing his eyes, Jake sank into the pillow, letting his thoughts settle into a gentle hum. There was no telling what tomorrow would bring. Another audition for Chloe, another coding challenge for Jake, maybe a new item of clothing arriving in the mail. But as he drifted off, he felt certain that whatever came next, he and Chloe would navigate it together in their own way. The silent apartment seemed to hold them both, as if acknowledging that two roommates bound by trust and friendship could share a life of small yet significant revelations. And with that, Jake found a quiet peace, ready to face another day in the place he called home, alongside a roommate who'd unknowingly sparked a change in him, and then graciously stood by him as he explored it. No labels, no fuss, just honest human connection.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.